Okay, for the last 4 years now, I've done something about a Christmas special. One year I did the 12 days of Christmas. Then I did a Sumerian Christmas. Then I did one where I showed connections and how we have modern Christmas today and where Christmas trees and things come from. Last year I did a Star of Bethlehem, and I guess this year's no different, for I'm going to give you one about a Christmas tale on this equinox, and this special one we're having at 2020 where there's a conjunction people are saying is another Star of Bethlehem. It contains naked men, as you can see there in that little picture there, Stonehenge, all the way back to Catalhoyuk, ancient Egyptians, and all of these people's connection, and it shows you a connection that goes back much further than even its origins because of its dispersal before the point that we're even talking about. So this is my Christmas gift to you. This is a seminar done by John Grigsby. He's from Bournemouth University, and I appreciate him very much. He's somebody on my same ilk, if you will, for he does some comparative mythology here to make connections about ancient sites. We start at Newgrange because that's what it's really all about and what he found, but then he makes connections. Enjoy.
So my interest is in Neolithic monuments and trying to find out what is behind them, the meaning behind them, why they were built, what their purpose was. And there had to have been a purpose. Richard Bradley says that the planning of monuments and even that of whole settlements often encapsulates a general perception of space, one which is shaped by mythology.
As much as topography. So hopefully you can hear this good. It's secondhand recording again, but turn it up a little bit. It'll make it worth your while. So he's telling you overall, Richard Bradley said, on the significance of ancient monuments, Caucasian people here, he says the planning of monuments and even that of whole settlements often encapsulates more general perceptions of space, one which shaped by mythology as much as topography. What does that mean? Well, they have mythologies that go along with it, and astrotheology, and we're about to look at a lot of that, but also topography. Where is that perfect place that makes everything line up and work right? Like recently, they finally figured out Stonehenge and a few other main sites that are doing this astronomy are on the 40th parallel. And by doing so, they're exactly at the highest point where the moon would go in its weeble wobble of up and down. And there's more connections and more connections. And here's one that's not readily known.
As much as topography, mythology being the vital word in this. Fact is, we do not have any mythology which dates back to the Neolithic, so how are we going to reconstruct it? We do have mythology associated with the sites. For instance, we have Irish tales which concern a god called the Dagda, which means the...
So, we don't really, let me clarify, I'm sorry for even busting in at that exact moment, but whenever we say that they don't have any mythology, we know now, of course, that this elven mythology and all of the breadth that goes with it, brownies and fairies and everything, comes from Proto-Indo-Europeans coming in and mixing with people here, who are brown-eyed people, brownies and pics and pixies, and how that all worked out. We're talking about Dagda, though, here. He's an ancient major god associated with the site.
He is the bearer of a prestigious weapon and a huge club. And he is a...
That's that naked man that has the huge phallus that's being shown on the side of it, the naked giant, if you will. People still to this day, and you can see it in the far left-hand corner there, I wish it carried it a little bit better, but people to this day will come, boys and girls will go there in the hopes of fertility and all of these things that go along with it. Well, we're going to make a lot of sense out of that here shortly.
Associated with Newgrange, the Neolithic site there. So there are myths which are associated with these sites, but do the myths themselves date back to those times, and what is the contents of those myths?
And we're going to find that he's going to show you that it does date back to a time that equals the Younger Dryas, but you got to wait for it, and the time of Newgrange and the founding. Let's continue.
Now, some of the myths are bizarre, and it's very hard to work out what's going on. Let's look at the myth of the Dagda. One of the myths, he goes into the camp with these enemy demons who represent the winter, and he eats an enormous amount of porridge, and then escapes the enemy's camp, and the enemy's daughter follows him and says that she will help him in the upcoming battle. It's actually a seasonal myth.
Now, it's a seasonal myth, like we have a lot of times in other ancient cultures that we've talked about in Easter and how things and bringing back of spring and all of these type of things. But it's an odd tale, and it's one of those things where in the tale there's always that, what the hell is that all about? Hopefully you can hear him good enough, for he's about to read this off to you here and what goes on in this concept of this mythological yet seasonal tale.
But try interpreting this. This is the girl has followed him out of the camp. The girl began to mock him, then she began wrestling him. She hurled him till he sunk to the hollow of his rump in the ground. He looked at her angrily and asked, "What business did you have, girl, heaving me out of my right of way? This business to get you to carry me on your back to my father's house. Who is your father? I am the daughter of Index, son of Dedomnan," she said. Then he moved out of the hole after letting go the contents of his belly. In other words, he shits in the hole. And then the girl waited for that. The girl waited for that a long time. She wanted to get out of the way, obviously. He got up then and took the girl on his back. Then he put 3 stones in his belt.
3 stones.
Each stone fell from it in turn, and it has been said that they were his testicles which fell from it. 3 testicles. He is a god after all.
He's a god, and he says so it goes with a 3, but actually 3 we've gotten into in a triad, and a situation goes on with that. But the little thing that goes along with that people always say, well, he's a god, so he didn't just have 2 testes.
The girl jumped on him and then struck him across the rump, and her curly pubic hair was revealed. Then the Dagda gained a mistress, and they made love. The mark remains at Belshore Strand where they came together. What the hell is going on?
Well, what is going on? So basically, he comes as a warrior into this demon's camp, which represent winter. And he eats a whole lot of porridge. Then he's got to go. So he leaves, and this girl pushes him down, but it actually says that she helps hold on to him into his rump in the hollow in the ground, like holding on to him while he goes to the bathroom in a way somehow, or got him shoved into this hole. And it says, well, why are you doing this? This business is to get you to carry me on your back to my father's house. This is in a way an ancient marriage rite concept. There's a lot of them through ancient folklore and stuff. Some of them are still used today. Have you ever heard of jumping the broom? Do y'all still do that over in the UK? Have you ever heard of carrying the bride across the threshold and what that signifies? And so on. Can you carry her on your back? Who's your father? And she says, I'm the daughter of Indek, the son of Dedomnan, who has to do with dominion over the cosmos in a way. But the strange thing here, who's your father? Where is he at? He's got to be right back in the camp that she just comes out of, right? So if you try to pick it apart, it starts to become a strange tale. He goes to the bathroom, and then she had been waiting for that a long time. It's a strange way to throw that in there, and what is that? He got up then, took the girl on his back, then he put 3 stones in his belt. This is Orion, yes, you've probably already gotten it. And each stone fell from it in turn, and it has been said that they were his testicles which fell from it. The girl jumped on him and smacked him across the rump, and her curly pubic hair was revealed. Then the Dagda gained a mistress, and they made love. And that little hole in the ground is still there today.
Now, some of these myths were written down in the early Middle Ages. Are we looking at some frustrated monk just sort of putting forward some strange sexual idea he has? Or is there more meaning behind this? Now, if Ronald Hutton was in the room, he would say, well, we can't actually say that these myths are any earlier than the early Middle Ages. But I'll show that we can perhaps argue that they are.
Aha. So a lot of people say a lot of this mythology that came out of the elves type of thing come blustering up in the Middle Ages. But no, that went from way back before. And the coming together was what brought that up. So that's thousands of years older than the people thinking that, or we date this site and so on going on. But we're going to find an old elder dating that goes along with this concept in a short while. It'll show you it goes back to a special date.
These are the Indo-European languages, and the normal model is that they spread from the Russian steppes along with horse riding and metalworking in about 3500 BC. Now, following Colin Renfrew's idea, the Anatolian hypothesis, that'd be Colin texting that.
So now these were nomadic warriors that came in, and these are the people that we talk about in the Anglo-Saxons and Normans and so on after that. But there was a first one, and I always tell you about this other wave that came through, and that's how it developed the threefold thing. Is there was one, then two, then three. He's about to show you the three. And this is the heralds of civilization. In fact, this picture looks very much like this ring and this Roman ring I showed you. It also, strangely a little bit, even though it's a charioteer type of concept, it's a little like Santa Claus. Well, if he had a Phrygian cap on, he sure would, huh? Especially if those horses were actually reindeer. Let's continue and talk about this second hypothesis, because it's the one that brought about the linguistics into it, and it connects with ancient Hittites and so on, and through the Caucasus area region and Anatolia, and of course leads down and into Egypt and the Holy Land.
He argued that the languages actually came from Anatolia and spread around 6500 BC along.
About 6500, 6400 BC. You're going to hear me say that again and again in a lot of my videos, because there's a lot of sites where all of a sudden in archaeology things change right about then. Things are moving, things are happening. There's a whole bunch of crap going on. As much as there is a younger dryas and things going on there, there's a whole lot of movement in archaeology. And of course now we're getting to the point where people are starting to leave a lot of stuff behind, getting into the pottery type thing, and so they can figure it out from that. It's left behind a lot. Let's continue.
With farming, so these are farming-based mythologies rather than warrior-based mythologies.
I'm sorry. He's telling you that farmers got their 6,500, about 3,500 comes across the others in first wave, and then one after it like we just talked about. But in the concept here, the words for things, expressions, and so on that come out of it are from a farming-based mythology rather than warrior-based mythologies. Although it's been put together, make no mistake, the kernel or the overall flavor of the soup is beef. We're fixing to get into that. You can see it looks like somebody in the bottom picture there, where the top is a charioteer, the bottom one is a guy cooking barbecue and got some bulls and their horns. It also shows you there's a triangle that's hooked up to that, or maybe a diamond shape where he's got the handle just before and he's spinning it around. That's just cave art, old cave art, done in that red ochre symbology.
And it kind of makes sense. The ethnonym, the name that these Indo-European speakers call themselves is the Aryans. It has unfortunate connotations in modern day, but Aryans means the ploughman. If you're a warrior society, why would you call yourself the ploughman? It's lurking more and more, and there are.
So what he gave up there is one of the secrets of the Aryan name, for it meant sun worshippers. It literally means the heralds of civilization, but also it means plowmen. And when you put that together, you say, well, all these people that were doing farming and everything helped bring civilization to everybody. And you're like, yep. Well, what about these warrior guys later? Same dudes. They got into a warring type things, and then the snake ended up biting its tail, like we talked about. Here we can see a map, which I wish I had the other picture of, and it shows you all these connections, all down into Anatolia, leading down, but it also shows connections way over here into the Middle East. Doesn't show any right up in here necessarily so much, but it does show the horsemen people from here and their connectives. And it shows you these ancient Tocharians. They went up to this way, but they're not shown. Well, they are the image. And it also shows you India and its integration. He's going to go into a few different cultures that these people impinged upon at the extremes of the earth. Let's continue.
Other scientific disciplines which are backing this up, the Indo-European myths are spreading from the Near East. What I've done in my studies, I won't move into it too much now, is reconstruct a dendrograph of Indo-European myth and to highlight where certain motifs originate and whether they're sort of farming myths or warrior myths. Now, the main Proto-Indo-European creation myth, as put forward by Bruce Lincoln, suggests that we have a figure called man who kills a giant called twin, and it's all very androcentric. There's no women to be seen. There's a sort of ox who occurs in some of the stories. That's about it. But actually,
or in some, he slays his brother, like in the biblical story in Twins. But then also you can carry those over to the left real far, and all of a sudden we get these stories of giants that they had to go up against again. Well, both of them had this thing going on. So whenever they put their cultures together, they just twisted it around to where, yeah, we beat those guys, didn't we? They were we then.
looking at these myths in real close detail, we find that they only occur over here. All these details actually crumble under closer scrutiny. When we look at an alternative, we have a male and female pairing who are mating. This is the creation of the world, and then they are rent apart.
So this is a version of the creation drawn on a wall before, and they've showed it to where a man and a woman are kissing and getting together here. And then some other creature, like Dad who don't like it, comes in with an axe and renders them apart. He's got a boner and another little stick that's actually got a trident on the tip of it for a reason. But let's just continue.
By this chap here. Now this occurs all over the Indo-European world, but actually it seems to be in origin Near Eastern as well. For instance, it occurs in Egyptian myth. We have the earth god Geb and the sky goddess Nut. They're joined together in this kind of union before time.
So if you know the Egyptian myth that goes along with it, there's Geb as the ground, and he's got his butt pushed down in a dent in the ground, the whole 9 yards. And there she is lifting and arching herself up above him. That's the same thing. This is also pushing up Tiamat's rib cage, if you will, doing the type of things because Bahamut was her mate. But something happened along with that, and it caused the creation of our earth and left us behind our moon. Moons have a lot to do with this too. Luna, milk. Let's continue.
And then they are split apart by the air god Shu, and this creates the world, and from the void in between the sun rises.
So oddly, he's fixing to show it to you here too, but she eats the sun. It goes through her body, and then she gives birth to it back out again. Some people are smart enough to realize that if you eat something, it doesn't come back out your birth canal, but that's a different situation. This is cosmic. and people that are gods of this earth, showing you how it all works and how they got it all figured out. A lot of it doesn't make any sense to anybody in the modern day. We've got so scientific. You go back through it, and it's like, well, that's pretty amazing. That's the god Shu of Shu Nun. Yep, those are the people hooked up with the sons of Horus and the followers of Horus. They supposedly have ruled this for over 10,000 years before they got this together. It's another little strange tale, isn't it?
The male-female pairing representing the earth and the sky and the separation.
In your Bible, it does a similar thing where it says that the earth was void and everything, and then the face of God hovers above the earth and da-da-da and everything. And if you've ever been a woman in that position, there you go. And they can here goes creation, huh? Look at this picture, and it's a picture of our Milky Way. We're about to make connections on why it's even called the Milky Way and how it's been kept that for so long. People say, well, you know, it's got a black streak through it just as much as a white thing does, but I guess I can see it. It could be a lot of things. Yeah, it could. It could be a glass dome full of bubbles and stuff that some people come up with too. But if you look, it even kind of looks like her arched over, where you can see it up, come up to her backside, and then the way she comes over, and there's her head, and then before that, her arms reach down, and it really even kind of looks like it, or at least when they draw her all length out like a weird creature, kind of looks like it. But if you look, there's also a little blurb on her back. Let's continue.
Note is also the Milky Way, but also represents the Nile. So there's the water in the heavens and the water is reflected down below, as we heard about earlier. As above, so below.
We've probably said that 1,000 times in 1,500 videos that I've got, but it's something where they're marrying the heavens to the earth and connecting with the gods and becoming gods and representatives, so on like that. But in the reflection of water, it eventually made people want to make mirrors and everything that goes along with that, and then the technologies that come from that. And it's amazing how certain wants spurned across great things eventually. Could have happened faster, but it was very much held back. But the river Nile has to do with this. And again, so we've got a river, and we've got a river in heaven. And we talked recently when we were going through the Egyptian thing about how that solar boat goes up and it hits heaven and it rides on through this solar journey as the sun is going around. And the guy that goes with that is Set, which is Seth of the Bible, by the way, and also Typhon and a few others. He's a red-headed god. Well, there's red-headed Egyptians and so on too, but it's red-headed for a reason. We're fixing to look at that here in a moment too. And when she, again, eats the sun here, and it comes back out of her here. When it comes back out of her here, though, because the sky's spun around, it puts the sun back over here where the east was, and it rises in the east and comes over, and there's Horus, or the 12 hours of Horus, or Horus hours. Just switch one letter. Some of this is pretty easy. Let's continue.
She's also represented as a white cow, known as Mehet Weret, which means the great flood. This is a great flood in heaven and the great flood on earth.
So now all of a sudden we hit on a great flood. And it's attached to this event. And I want you to remember that later. But there's that white sacred cow and the Apis bull and these things that go along with it. Well, this white cow, and it's hooked up through Hathor. You can see the Hathor type thing and her draped over it. And its concept, the sun in her mouth, the sun again being born, shining down, growing the plants up. There's a little hill device. She's setting into it. White cows. That's pretty important too. But now we talk about a flood. Then in your Bible kind of says the heavens gate opened up and there was water in the heavens and it fell upon the earth. Well, there's something else that kind of fell, and actually it goes along with this dating that brought about to the Egyptians, to the ancient Irish, Proto-Indo-Europeans too, and it predates all of the three things I just talked about in time. So you can see her eating and doing that, but also if you look on the right-hand side, and I think he's fixing to say it, you can see the solar boat passing through a cow. What? He eats cud, it goes around, it does this thing, and then it comes back out. Cows make milk. Mothers make milk. Women used to be called cows. I know any woman listening to that is not going to like to be heard that. Listen, we were a bull. From way back before coming into Taurus, we were a bull. And so you are our cow. There's a sire, like a major one, and he's the king of the little flock situation. Yeah, there's a pharaoh. It all works together. At one time, women wanted to look very healthy. In fact, if you could keep a woman healthy and fat, you did something. In a modern day, that can't be shown. All the Egyptians, though, are always shown, and all this art always shows them like this. We found a whole lot of mummies, including Hatshepsut herself. It was kind of obese. Well, we look at the land of Punt, where they said that they had came from and everything, and the ancient Horners that used to live up there, and the depictions in Candace and the Persianish ladies that are there, and they're all heavied out too. And it's like, oh, at one time that was so the fashion. Well, it's gone weebling back and forth. You can look at queens and things like that and see how, oh, they got just not too long ago we had a very heavy queen come through for a couple, and then all of a sudden now it's gone back to kind of, well, she still has an ideal of maybe the 1950s through 30s and a hippie lady and this, that, and the other. But it's not like she could sit and just change herself or anything. But it's amazing how the fashion follows more with things. Well, no, it doesn't necessarily so. Those people are around all the time. Let's just continue. But we're now, oh, by the way, at a great flood.
And we can see here, this is actually an astronomical image from Temple of Dendra. This is the goddess Hathor, who is a variant of Nut, eating the sun on the horizon at sunset, and then giving birth to the sun on the eastern horizon the next morning. And the sun travels through her body at night. And here we can see the same image with the sun as a solar boat travelling through the body of a white cow to be born the next day. So does this occur anywhere in Celtic myth? Here's Mehedweret, and here's the goddess Nut, and she appears on every coffin lid. She's associated with the dead.
So we can see her image that's on there, and she's associated with dead there, so she's pretty much got a Ka image. And of course all the people were swathed down with a black lacquer type of thing after getting baked and turned into beef jerky and have their organs removed and their brain out their nose, all that we know about. But on the left there's that white cow image, and here we see it again on this coffin here. And what you see is that not at her head you see a red spot, but down in her body. So she is now 8 sunset. The sunset looks real orange, and then we get that set, and you know it's the why we call it sunset. But she's eaten that red sun and going to rebirth a brand new yellow one the next day, and it goes around and it gets tired at the end of the day and starts turning red, like our red giant our sun's eventually turn into. She eats it and regenerates it, and it goes back through, and you can see the color even dictated right there where they're going, yep, that goes with that, that goes with that. White bulls, though, white cows, unblemished. That's from the Bible. That has to do a lot with it. Well, at Taurus, at the end of that, they kind of changed and they went into Aries and then started doing rams and everything like that. And that's a symbol, just like Jesus is a symbol for Pisces. We'll kind of get into that here in a little bit because we're connecting to that too, of course, during this little Christmas special we've got going on here. Hopefully you can hear him.
In Egyptian cosmology, your soul became a star in the afterlife. So you would enter the body of the goddess, which is the Milky Way, in order to be reborn.
Hopefully you heard him say that, but in Egyptian iconography and mythology, if you will, and in their religion, If you had been a good enough person, you become a star. Derived from this is all kinds of things, like wish upon a star and twinkle, twinkle, little star. It's amazing how somebody saying twinkle, twinkle, little star, wonder what you are, and that kid growing up, getting a hold of a telescope, and now being able to tell people, you know what that is? But you used to become a star. And if you believed it ever worked for them, it perhaps still works today, and you end up getting put into heaven. If you're great enough, you might even get a whole constellation like Orion or Aryan named after you. Well, they're already all in place. Yeah, this all happened a long time ago. Everything's already been named unless you want to come up with something new. Then we'll come up with a new name for it, usually in a conglomeration that means something about something that went on before. Milky Way. Cows. Unblemished. Sun replenishment. Equinoxes. Winter solstice. Christmas. Let's continue.
So this is why it is associated with death. Now, what is the relationship between this and Celtic myth? Well, this is Newgrange in Ireland. Newgrange, as I said, was associated with this figure here. That's Sir Nabbit's giant, the image I'm using there. He is mating with a goddess known as Boine. Boine means white cow.
So, I did a video not too long ago about Boine in that river valley that's there, and another one about how there's this giant set of pits that's just huge that used to be there at one time with a couple of sets of rings on it, starting to sound like Atlantis and things. But here we talk about Boine. It means white cow. And so that's the river's name that goes there, and that'll go along with it. Now, it's going to sound weird here. The man has to mate with the goddess, and because it's just like Hathor, just like Egypt, it's going to be a cow. It's going to be a sacred white cow that you see with this Celtic scribbling on up under it. But what is that? Well, that's when people come together and you mate. But that's also happening with the earth and the sky, and that's what created all of us in the first place, and they're honoring that and continuing on with it, this white cow. You think that's kind of strange and by itself, but there are a lot of ancient tales where Zeus turns into a cow and then takes this girl and does this. Oh, it's a white cow? I'll be damned. There it is again. Non-blemished. Here we go. Minotaur and other stories that go along with that, which sound just outlandish, quite often, as I said, are zodiacal in nature and have to do with mythologies, keeping things in track, and it's some silly little story. Well, you remember it because of the bullshit, right? Let's continue.
She forms the River Boyne. It's named after her. There's a great flood which happens after she walks around a well 3 times and she's drowned in the water. So she is the great flood of the water, just as Meheret is in Egyptian.
And that would mean that she is the same thing as an Egyptian, and she's the Milky Way. And it's a white cow, and it's all the same. This is one of 36 connections that people have come up with, at least, that I know of, that connect the ancient Irish, other than just red, blonde hair, and this, that, and the other, and the fact that their linguistics, all kinds of expressions, ways of doing things, and so on, end up connected. But you can get mythologies and stuff, and comparative mythology, it's a hell of a thing. All of a sudden you realize, why does your Venus do the same thing as my Venus type person does, as my Inanna does, as my this does? It's because they're all connected in a certain way, and actually it all comes from before that, where they already had these ideals as they came in and grew it to be something slightly different than one another, but they all started from the same roots. Multiple times. Now he says she goes around a well 3 times and then drowns. There have been people who took this mythology situation that he's talking about and said, these people are telling you that they have been alive for 3 great years of over 28,000 years each. And in their third one, something bad happened, this thing, and it drowned, and blah, 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 and all this bullshit happened. And that's how we ended up here at the River Boine. If you study Proto-Indo-Europeans and stuff and figure that out, you go, well, you came from over there. What happened? Well, a long, long time ago, which we're fixing to get into in a minute, they had an event happen called the Younger Dryas event. And then at 6500, something else happened. And then nomads started whooping ass at about 3000. But so whenever you go out to a beach, there's not just one wave. There's a series of them. And if you ever pay attention to it, the ninth wave is always a little bit bigger, and surfers try to go for it. And of course, there's high tide and low tide. But let's go on.
But she's also associated with the Milky Way, as we will see. The Milky Way is called Boine, which is the road of the white cow. Boine is the Irish name for Newgrange, normally translated to palace on the Boine, but as Boine means white cow, there's a closer translation. Brew actually means belly or womb, the womb of the white cow.
So now, if we don't connect it at least 3 different times, but then both Finn, Finnish type people, and this thing that goes along with it, does that have to do with fishing and fishing? Oh, no, there's an ocean right here in your sky right above you. There's this whole other concept. If you get out on the sea, you can look on it, and there's a reflection of it happening up out there, especially in calm waters and so on. But both are now both Finn. That's what it's called. But what does it mean? Well, it's the road of the white cow, and when you go up that river, it'll go and then keep going. Yeah, sacred people would sometimes be put in a boat and set down that river, arrows shot into it that are on fire, and let it go and pretty much cremate itself. Where are all their bodies at? Probably in the lasting parts of that lake, been chewed over for so many years from gravel and things going down through it. You'll never find them again. But if you really look right out there in that delta, you might find little fragments of something, of charred bodies and so on. Ancient Vikings and a few other cultures that did this same type situation at points. But Boine, Bruja is a witch. So Boine, why is it a witch? Well, they use cauldrons and they make potions and do all these things, right? And of course, that's just healers and doing things. It's not what we're thinking of now. I did a video about that. But what we have the situation of is Bruna. It's the kettle. It's the kettle that's rebrewing it. That's where you get brewing from. The cauldron or the kettle are the womb of the white sacred cow. Wow. Man, this is going to go to part 2, isn't it? If it does, it's in your top left-hand corner. Let's continue.
So just as in Egyptian tradition, the coffin represents the womb of the white cow goddess and the Milky Way. So we see that in Irish.
So again, there's that connection with ancient Egypt and Ireland. What do they got? They got a cow, they got this, they got everything else. Well, can we trace it back anywhere else other than this? Yep, fixing to.
And as we know, Newgrange is aligned on the winter solstice sunrise. So the ancient Irish were possibly being born from the womb of the white goddess, as a white cow, as were the ancient Egyptians.
What? Yep. Notice how it has a lintel and then another place above it, so there can be this beam that comes through there. I hear it's quite an experience if you've ever experienced it. No, it's not all cramped like you think. It's pretty good sized. And opens up into a cross on the inside of it, by the way. Also, it has things that are upside down in it, and it's like, what? Well, it's the underworld. But there's only one day whenever this light comes through and does this connection. But then again, so it's connecting to the white cow goddess, the Milky Way. I'll be damned if the Egyptians don't have that same situation going on. It's not the exact same flavor though, is it? Yeah, it is. It's just a little bit different. You ever had Italian food? Just a little different.
Now, this connection between the cow goddess and tombs is something that we see throughout the Neolithic world. I won't spend too much on this, but it also goes back to the sort of the long barrows, where it can be argued that there is some sort of cow symbolism in these tombs.
Well, there's cow horns in a lot of places, and this symbology of also a sickle, where you can make this connection and then say, well, that's got two things then. It's not necessarily just the farmers, but it's people that had cattle too. Yeah, and there's bull horns in other places that look just like the little place in the center part where you see the two that look like a crescent or some eclipse, and people have made a lot out of it and say, well, those are all synonymous with each other. Here's one for you. So we're talking about milk and cow and all this type of stuff. You know, the ancient people thought that the moon was made of cheese. Why the hell would it be made of cheese? Well, you're not listening. See, it's all milk, and it goes in the sky, and it's been spinning around, so you churn that up, and you make milk, right? Some of them even like Swiss cheese, knock knock, has little holes all in it and craters, and people thought the Milky Way, it's the thing. Oh yeah, how many different people had this Milky Way concept? Well, everybody that touched upon the Proto Indo-Europeans, in fact, India, China, Far East, Near East, of course we're seeing Egypt definitely into it. The cultures all around the entire Mediterranean, and of course where we're heartening it here is in Ireland and the British lands. Let's continue. But if you'll look right there on the far right, you're seeing a weird stance of a body type thing that's got like titties, if you will, but then there's these 9 bands, but it also kind of looks like a menorah type thing that's on it, only her head makes up the one in the center in a way. Got her hands on her belly, looking Gobekli Tepe, looking all kinds of, but let's make another connection farther than this, guy. Can you do it?
We have, for instance, head and hooves burials, where the bodies of the deceased were placed in structures which may have been covered in cow's hides. It's like going inside the body of the goddess.
So he's saying the structures that they build here for the burials basically are covered in a cowhide, which a lot of it is rotted away, but they can tell that. Now, strangely, in ancient Egypt, after they get the whole cocooning like a butterfly thing down, they definitely drop the idea of wrapping in a skin. In fact, there are a lot of Egyptologists that say, oh, when they found them wrapped in skins, that's supposed to be some kind of curse upon them or whatever, almost as bad as not putting a complete body together or so on, not giving a correct burial. Strange how it could be used against itself, but we can find some early burials that are in there that are using that fact. But then how it all broke down and how who took over who and everything went down and the mythologies that got pulled into it, you can see how that might have been shoved aside.
Same here, we still call these entrance parts of these tombs horns. That's our sort of archaeological term.
So whenever you come around the bend into these things, they call them horns. He says it's their archaeological term. Well, in the Bible, the horns on the altar shows you that there used to be horns on that altar. Yeah. But also in ancient houses, in ancient long barrows like you're talking about, they used to have these tops on them, which were basically like this, cut up. A lot of people have said that ended up making horns. Well, those long barrel houses are quite often made out of giant ships in the first place. Even things as late as the Mayflower gets turned into a barn. You just flip it over. Pretty much, that's it. Yeah, upside down world. But it makes a damn good barn. Get enough Amish together and they all get around and pick it up and carry it where the hell you want it. aim it exactly where you want it. So we're going to part 2 now. It's in your top left-hand corner. We'll start from this exact point. We'll see you there. Click in the top left. Peace.